I always believed I understood life. After 45 years, I thought nothing could really surprise me anymore. My routines were carved into the evenings like grooves in a favorite old record: work, a solitary dinner at the tiny kitchen table, soft jazz drifting from my radio, a steaming mug of tea cradled in my palms as night crept over the city. My world was predictable, small but safe, every item in its place, every day a gentle echo of the last. I suppose, in some way, that's why I opened the door so calmly when the knock came, even though I wasn't expecting anyone at that hour. There she was, Monica. My younger stepsister, the family's wild card, the unpredictable spark that flared and vanished and sometimes came back just to see who she could startle into laughter or exasperation. I hadn't seen her in months, maybe close to a year, not since that awkward Thanksgiving when we'd both stayed too long at the table to avoid the empty space of conversation. But there she stood, her arms wrapped around herself, her hair a little windblown, shivering in a thin jacket against the night chill. She smiled at me, a little crooked, like she wasn't sure if she should be apologizing for the intrusion or asking to be let in. She didn't have to say much. I could see in her face that she was tired, maybe a bit lost, maybe a little embarrassed. She told me her apartment's heat had gone out, the landlord nowhere to be found, and outside the wind was cutting straight through to the bone. I could hear the storm gathering in the street behind her. Without thinking, I stepped aside and welcomed her in, feeling the cold bite of the air slip past us as she crossed the threshold. She dropped her bag at the door and shook herself off, looking smaller and younger than I remembered. Inside, the apartment was warm, a little cluttered in the corners but filled with soft lamplight and the faint scent of lemon from my evening tea. Monica stood uncertain in the entryway, glancing around as if she'd just entered a different world. I led her to the kitchen, started water boiling again, and fetched a blanket from the sofa for her shoulders. She wrapped herself up, gratefully, pulling her legs onto the chair as I handed her a cup. Her fingers shook a little, and she laughed it off, blaming the weather, the long day, the useless radiator in her building. We talked about simple things at first. She told me about her job, her landlord troubles, the latest drama with one of her friends. I nodded along, letting her words settle into the corners of the kitchen. The wind rattled the windows, making the apartment feel smaller, cozier, like a little shelter against the world. I watched her over the rim of my mug, noticing lines near her mouth I hadn't seen before, the tiredness beneath her eyes, the way her voice sometimes drifted off into silence. Time passed quietly. We finished our tea and moved to the living room, sinking into the worn cushions of the couch, the blanket still around her shoulders. We found an old movie on TV, left the sound low, and let the familiar images flicker across the walls. Monica curled up beside me, her bare feet tucked under her, and soon enough I felt the warmth of her body next to mine. There was something gentle in the way she leaned in, her head nearly resting on my shoulder, her breath steadying, as if she could finally relax for the first time all day. When the movie ended, she glanced at me with a quiet smile, almost shy, and admitted she was still cold. The heater in my building was old but working, the bedroom much warmer than the rest of the apartment. I hesitated, only for a moment, before telling her she could share my bed if she wanted. It wasn't a big gesture, just a practical solution on a cold night, or so I told myself. She nodded, almost in relief, and followed me down the short hallway. We changed in silence, the soft rustle of clothing the only sound between us. When we slipped under the covers, the warmth was immediate, startling, as if the cold had been hiding in my bones and she'd chased it out just by being there. I lay there in the darkness, listening to the subtle rhythms of the night, to the quiet sounds of Monica breathing, to the faint city noises behind the thick walls. Every few minutes she would shift, the bed dipping, her arm brushing mine by accident, or maybe not by accident at all. My mind wandered, tracing old memories, new questions, a faint current of anticipation that left my heart beating a little faster than usual. I stared at the ceiling, watching the streetlights flicker across the paint, feeling a weightless sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. That night, I realized, life could still surprise me. And I found myself waiting, curious, awake, more alive than I'd been in a very long time. The morning crept in softly, the weak winter sun pushing pale rays through the blinds and painting thin gold stripes across the foot of my bed. For a few moments I hovered in that delicious space between sleep and waking, aware only of warmth, the softness of the sheets, the unfamiliar yet comforting weight pressed against my side. Monica was there, curled close, her breath slow and steady, her hair a dark river flowing over the pillow we shared. I could feel the heat radiating from her skin, a steady hum that chased away any lingering chill from the night before. I stayed very still, almost afraid to move and break the fragile spell of this new closeness. The apartment was silent except for the muffled sounds of the city coming to life outside, a distant siren, a bus grinding along the icy street, someone's dog barking a few houses away. I listened to Monica breathing, watched the rise and fall of her shoulders, and let my eyes wander along the gentle curve of her back under the thin fabric of my old t-shirt. She looked peaceful, and there was something so tender in the way she clung to the edge of the mattress, her hand curled loosely in the space between us as if she'd been reaching for me in her sleep. Eventually, I eased myself from the bed, careful not to wake her, and shuffled to the kitchen to start the coffee. The floor was cold under my feet, the early light blue and clean, and I moved quietly, still wrapped in the aura of the night we'd shared. I set the kettle to boil and watched the steam rise, feeling my thoughts swirl in the same lazy pattern. I realized how much I'd missed mornings that felt like this, soft, unhurried, filled with something unspoken and new. It was different from the loneliness I'd become used to. There was a sense of anticipation beneath my skin, a lightness I hadn't known for years. Monica appeared in the kitchen a little while later, rubbing her eyes, her hair tousled from sleep, wrapped in the same blanket we'd shared on the couch. She looked at me and smiled, a genuine, sleepy smile that sent a pulse of warmth through my chest. She thanked me for letting her stay, her voice quiet and hoarse, and I poured her a mug of coffee, watching her hands as she wrapped them around the ceramic, soaking in the heat. We didn't speak much, but we didn't need to. There was a new kind of comfort between us, a quiet knowing that neither of us wanted to disturb. We spent the morning moving around each other in the small kitchen, sharing slices of toast, passing the butter, bumping elbows by the sink as we washed dishes. I noticed how natural it felt, how our rhythms matched without effort, how every little thing was easier with her there. The sun rose higher, sending warmer light into the room, illuminating dust motes and making the edges of everything glow. Monica laughed at something on her phone, the sound bright and clear, and I caught myself watching her, really watching her, struck by the way the light played along her jaw, the curve of her cheek, the gleam in her eyes when she looked up at me. By midday, the cold outside had lessened, but we stayed in, drawn by the cocoon of warmth we'd built between us. We pulled out an old board game from my closet, sat cross-legged on the rug, and played while the radio whispered old soul songs in the background. Monica teased me when I lost, her hand brushing my knee, lingering there for a second longer than necessary, her touch light but purposeful. I felt a tingle where her skin met mine, a slow burn spreading up my leg and into my chest. Later, we retreated to the living room, carrying mugs of fresh tea and a shared bowl of popcorn. We curled up together under the same blanket, the TV murmuring in the background while we watched the afternoon unfold through the frosted window. Monica rested her head on my shoulder, and I let my arm drape around her, feeling her settle into me as if she belonged there. Her presence was a balm, her warmth a kind of gentle promise that eased all the quiet ache I'd grown used to carrying alone. As dusk began to fall, filling the apartment with golden shadows and dusky lavender light, I realized how completely the day had changed me. The ordinary felt extraordinary, the simple act of sharing space became something intimate and profound. I watched Monica doze against my shoulder, her breath warm on my neck, her hand loosely clasped in mine, and understood that this gentle light, this warmth, was what I'd been missing all along. Night fell quietly, spreading a velvet hush over the apartment and turning every lamp and shadow into something softer, secret, expectant. We lingered together in the living room, the two of us tucked under the same worn blanket, the glow from the television flickering across our faces as we half watched an old movie and half listened to the wind as it rattled the windows. Monica's body pressed against mine felt both familiar and startling, as if every gentle shift and sigh contained a silent question neither of us had the words to ask. Her knee brushed my thigh each time she shifted, and I could feel the heat where her skin touched mine, a current that traveled up my side, quickening my breath. The hours drifted by, conversation dissolving into quiet, the movie ending and the television going dark, leaving us with only the soft hum of the city outside. Monica stretched, her body warm and languid against me, and then turned so that her face was close enough that I could see every shadow of her lashes, every subtle shift in her gaze. The apartment felt small, the silence thick and heavy, and every heartbeat seemed to echo off the walls. She hesitated, her hand resting on my waist, her thumb tracing slow circles over the fabric of my shirt. I stayed perfectly still, the world contracting to the space between our bodies. I could feel her breath on my cheek, sweet and uncertain, and my own breath caught in my throat as her fingers tightened ever so slightly, her touch moving lower, tentative but deliberate. The blanket slipped from my shoulders as I turned to face her more fully, and suddenly the air felt cool everywhere her body wasn't pressed to mine. She leaned in, her lips brushing the corner of my mouth, testing, gentle, a feather-light touch that sent a shockwave through me, unraveling whatever last threads of doubt I'd managed to keep wound tight. My skin tingled, hypersensitive to every place we touched, her hand slipping under the hem of my shirt, her fingertips moving slowly up my spine, her mouth finding mine in a kiss that was soft at first, searching, full of wonder and longing. I kissed her back, hunger and relief surging together, the years of careful distance dissolving between us. Our bodies moved as if they had always known this rhythm. Monica's touch grew bolder, her hands mapping every inch of me she could reach, her mouth traveling down my neck, grazing my collarbone, her breath hot against my skin. I shivered, not from the cold but from the impossible intensity of wanting her, of finally letting go. My own hands roamed over her back, down her sides, tugging her closer until there was no space left between us. Her thigh slipped between mine, and the heat there made me gasp, my whole body arching into her, desperate for more. Clothes slid away piece by piece, slow but urgent, as if we were afraid to rush and lose the magic but also terrified to wait a moment longer. The world narrowed to the feel of her bare skin beneath my fingers, the sound of her soft moans, the taste of her mouth, her hands pulling me under, drawing me open. I let myself fall, let myself burn, surrendering to every forbidden impulse, every ache, every need I'd denied for so long. There was nothing left but sensation, her tongue tracing my breast, her fingers sliding lower, her breath and mine tangled in the darkness, and the sweet, dizzying release that shattered me in her arms. We stayed like that for a long time, bodies twined together, hearts pounding in sync. The night outside was silent, the apartment full of the scent of skin and the quiet, steady rhythm of our breathing. For the first time in years, I felt completely, dangerously alive, awash in the knowledge that something irrevocable had passed between us. And for the first time, I didn't want to run from it. I wanted to stay exactly where I was, tangled in her warmth, every nerve still singing from the touch I had never dared to imagine. Morning arrived in slow, golden layers, slipping between the blinds and illuminating the corners of the bedroom with a soft, hesitant light. For a long while, I didn't move. I lay on my side, the covers pulled low around my waist, Monica pressed up against my back, her arm heavy and possessive over my ribs. Our legs were tangled, skin to skin, a warmth still lingering from the night before. I breathed in the scent of her, a mix of sleep and perfume and something unmistakably intimate. My eyes traced the familiar lines of the ceiling, my mind hovering somewhere between disbelief and quiet awe. The world outside felt far away, muffled by the cocoon of our shared breath and the hush of a morning too new to name. Her hand moved in her sleep, fingertips grazing the soft skin beneath my breast, and a shiver traveled through me, light but insistent, reminding me of everything that had changed. I closed my eyes, trying to recapture the weight of her body, the desperate sweetness of her mouth, the intensity of her touch. My skin remembered each kiss, each sigh, each moment we had allowed ourselves to stop pretending. I turned carefully, not wanting to wake her, and found her face relaxed in sleep, lips parted, lashes brushing her cheek. She looked younger, almost vulnerable, and I felt something fragile and fierce stir inside me, a need to protect her, to keep her close, to hold on to this feeling for as long as possible. The quiet filled the room, thick and golden. I listened to Monica's breathing, slow and even, and let my own match its rhythm. I felt raw and tender, but not afraid. My mind drifted, wandering back over every detail of the night, the first touch, the breathless laughter, the wild, breathless need, the way she had whispered my name and pressed her body so close I thought we might dissolve together. In that silence, I wondered what she would say when she woke, if the look in her eyes would be changed, if she would regret what we had done or wish it away in daylight. A faint ache bloomed in my chest at the thought, but I forced myself to breathe, to wait, to let morning arrive on its own terms. Eventually, Monica stirred, stretching with a little sigh, her arm tightening around me before she blinked herself awake. Our eyes met, and for a moment the world paused, everything fragile and uncertain. She smiled, sleep-heavy and genuine, her hand finding my cheek, her thumb brushing the line of my jaw. I smiled back, a shy, uncertain flutter moving through my stomach. She leaned in, pressing a slow, lingering kiss to my shoulder, and I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of it spread through me. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Every glance, every small touch said everything words could not. We stayed in bed longer than usual, our bodies nestled close, savoring the hush and the sun and the newness of being seen and wanted. When we finally slipped out of bed, pulling on t-shirts and old sweatpants, the room was filled with the lightness of something shared, something just born. We moved through the apartment together, brushing teeth, brewing coffee, quietly passing each other in the kitchen, the weight of what had happened still shimmering between us like heat on pavement after a summer rain. Our hands met over mugs, over plates, gentle and tentative, and each time felt like a promise. I watched Monica as she stood in the light, hair tangled, skin flushed, and something in me settled, deep and sure. Whatever the day brought, whatever questions would come, I wanted to meet them with her, just like this, wrapped in the golden hush of morning, the secret still safe between us, growing, blooming, impossibly real. The day moved slowly, as if the world outside had also sensed the shift and chose to tread carefully, so as not to break the fragile magic left in the wake of the night. The air in the apartment felt different, thicker somehow, weighted with a new energy that pulsed quietly in every room. I woke early, long before Monica, unable to fully shake the tension in my body or the lingering, bittersweet taste of her lips. I wandered to the bathroom and washed my face, studying my reflection in the mirror for any visible sign of change, but my eyes alone betrayed the truth. Something in them was softer, rawer, more open than before. When Monica joined me in the kitchen, her presence seemed almost tentative, like she was testing the ground beneath her feet. She didn't look at me right away. She stood at the window, arms folded, her silhouette drawn in the blue light of morning. I busied myself making coffee, filling the silence with small movements, careful not to let anything crash or clatter. Each moment between us stretched long and thin, filled with the memory of skin on skin, of breathless confessions we had given each other in the dark. The distance from the kitchen counter to where she stood seemed immense, and yet I felt her everywhere, the ache in my hips, the tingling on my neck, the echo of her name whispered again and again behind my ribs. We ate breakfast in silence, stealing glances across the table, searching for familiar cues in a suddenly unfamiliar landscape. I wanted to ask her how she felt, if she regretted it, if she wanted to take it all back, but I was too afraid to break the quiet, too afraid to expose the raw, red heart of what we'd become. Instead, we passed the butter, shared a piece of toast, watched the steam rise from our mugs. Her hand brushed mine, just for a second, and I felt a rush of longing so acute it almost hurt. She didn't pull away, but she didn't linger either. After breakfast, we both retreated into the motions of our separate routines, but our paths kept intersecting in ways that felt deliberate and charged. Monica would pass behind me as I loaded the dishwasher, her fingers grazing the small of my back, and my breath would hitch, sharp and bright. In the hallway, I found her standing quietly, staring at a framed photo of our family, her expression unreadable. I watched her for a long time, afraid to interrupt her thoughts, afraid of what they might mean. It struck me how much of our history was tangled together, how many moments, large and small, had led us to this one. I spent part of the afternoon sorting laundry, folding and refolding the same shirts, running my thumb along the seam of Monica's sweater. I could still remember the weight of her head on my shoulder, the warmth of her breath against my skin. Every small thing seemed to pulse with new significance. I caught sight of Monica curled up on the couch, staring at her phone but not really seeing anything. Her body was turned toward me, knees drawn to her chest, and I ached to go to her, to close the space and reclaim the certainty of the night before. But I held back, unsure of what she wanted, unsure of how to cross the border we had so carefully built between ourselves for years. Later, she joined me in the living room, settling beside me with a careful distance that felt both thoughtful and unbearable. We watched the flicker of an afternoon movie, but my attention drifted constantly, drawn instead to the soft sound of her breathing, the line of her jaw, the way her fingers picked at the edge of a cushion. When she reached for the remote, her arm brushed mine and lingered, just barely, a wordless apology or maybe a question. I looked at her then, really looked, and in her eyes I saw uncertainty and hope tangled together. The silence between us was different from any I'd known before. It was not empty, not void, but full of possibility and questions. It was the silence of a storm gathering out at sea, not yet breaking, but powerful and impossible to ignore. Every so often, Monica would look at me, as if she wanted to say something and thought better of it, and I would feel the words rise in my own throat only to dissolve on my tongue. There was no roadmap for what came next, no instructions for how to move forward from a night that had changed everything. I wished for her to touch me again, to laugh and break the tension, to reassure me that we were still us, only more, only deeper, only finally honest. As the day faded into evening, the golden light pooled in the corners of the apartment, the shadows growing longer, the air heavy with what we could not say. Monica stood by the window as the sun slipped below the horizon, her silhouette painted in orange and blue, her reflection shimmering against the glass. I watched her, feeling the ache of distance and the desperate hope for connection, knowing that one of us would have to speak first, one of us would have to offer a bridge back to the place where everything was safe and simple. But that place was gone now, replaced by something bigger, something that frightened and thrilled me in equal measure. We spent the rest of the evening much as we had the day, moving together but apart, tethered by memory and longing, by the truth we had uncovered in the dark. When it was time for bed, Monica hesitated in the hallway, looking at me with searching eyes. I reached for her hand, unable to bear the space between us for one more second, and she let me pull her close, her body fitting against mine as if it belonged there. We didn't speak, didn't try to define the new shape of our lives, but as we curled together under the covers, the silence finally softened into something gentle, something that felt almost like hope. And in that quiet, with her heart beating against my chest, I realized that every change begins with a single, trembling moment of truth. Evening bled into the apartment with a hush, the city beyond the windows settling into shadows and the slow rhythm of headlights passing in the street. After another dinner spent half in silence, Monica and I sat together on the edge of the sofa, knees touching, hands restless. The air felt heavy, full of things unsaid and questions neither of us dared voice. I could sense a change coming, something imminent and unstoppable, like the moment before a summer storm breaks and the world holds its breath. I retreated to the bedroom after clearing the dishes, needing a few moments of solitude. My heart was uneasy, my thoughts crowded with memories of the night before and the painful, awkward hesitations of the day. I stood in front of the mirror, running my fingers over my jaw, searching my reflection for answers or at least some hint of courage. Behind me, the faint sound of Monica moving through the apartment echoed, her footsteps padded, uncertain, lingering in the hallway as if she, too, was gathering herself for something final. The phone rang, sudden and sharp in the quiet, jolting me from my reverie. My mother's voice spilled through the line, cheerful and oblivious, announcing plans to visit the next morning and bring several relatives, including Monica's father. I felt a chill run through me, a deep, ancestral warning. My mind raced through the logistics of the apartment, the remnants of last night's passion scattered invisibly in the sheets, the possibility that someone might sense the change in me, the new secret I carried like a second pulse. My mother spoke of food, of family, of coming early to help, and I answered with automatic words, my voice somehow steady despite the rising panic that clawed at my chest. When I finally hung up, I found Monica standing in the doorway, arms folded tight around her body, eyes shadowed and already braced against disappointment. She must have heard the conversation, or maybe she just sensed it in the sudden stillness of the room. Without a word, she turned away, walking to the hall closet, pulling out her bag, moving with the slow, exhausted precision of someone who has done this before, packed up, left, disappeared before she could be asked to explain herself. I watched her gather her things, each motion etched in heartbreak, my own feet rooted to the floor, throat aching with words I couldn't say. She paused by the door, looking back at me, her expression a mix of sadness, resolve, and something almost like relief, as if the inevitability of this ending had released us both from the ache of uncertainty. I wanted to rush to her, to beg her to stay, to shout that we could find a way to hide, to fight, to be brave for just one more night. But the words dried up before they reached my lips, stifled by the certainty that the world outside would never allow this quiet, secret happiness to survive. Monica slipped out, the door closing behind her with a finality that echoed through every room. I stood there for a long time, listening to the emptiness, feeling the loss settle around me like dust. My hands trembled as I tried to put the apartment back in order, folding blankets, smoothing sheets, erasing every visible sign of what we had shared, all while the invisible ones burned beneath my skin. I paced from room to room, searching for traces of her, a stray earring, a faint impression in the pillow, the scent of her skin on the collar of my shirt. Each discovery sent a new wave of pain through me, sharp and unforgiving. That night, I did not sleep. I lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, heart pounding with regret and longing and the terrible knowledge that love, once claimed, can be taken away in a single heartbeat. I played the memories over and over, chasing the feeling of her mouth on my neck, the weight of her body, the way she'd whispered my name into the dark. The hours stretched on, haunted by what if and if only, and dawn came as no comfort, only another demand for pretense. Morning arrived in a flurry of activity, my mother bustling in with relatives in tow, their voices loud, their laughter a discordant soundtrack to my silent grief. Monica's father stood in the living room, hands on his hips, eyes sharp and searching, but I hid behind practiced smiles and careful small talk, serving coffee and pastries as if nothing in my world had shifted, as if the night before was just another ordinary passage of time. The apartment filled with chatter and the clatter of dishes, and I moved through it all like a ghost, present but unseen, desperate to keep my secret from rising up and swallowing me whole. In the bathroom, behind a locked door, I finally allowed the tears to fall, silent and uncontrollable, not from shame, not from fear, but from the raw pain of having touched happiness for one brief night only to have it stolen by the world's cold logic. I pressed my forehead against the glass, trembling, aching for something I could not name. I remembered Monica's last glance, the promise of love in it, the surrender to what neither of us could change. The day dragged on, every minute stretched by the effort of pretending, and when the last guest left, I stood alone in the empty apartment, listening to the clock tick, each second an accusation, each shadow a memory. I walked through the rooms, touching the places we had been, feeling the echo of her laughter, the warmth of her body, the silent music of what we had tried and lost. I understood then that there would never be an easy ending, never a clean break, only the ache of longing, the memory of a love that had changed me forever, and the quiet, infuriating knowledge that sometimes happiness is just a single night, and even that can be too much for the world to allow. In the weeks that followed, I wore my sorrow quietly, carrying it with me through every day, letting it settle into the spaces between chores, between conversations, between the person I used to be and the woman I had become. Monica's absence was everywhere and nowhere, a hollow in the bed, a cup on the counter, a half-read book she left behind. I wondered if she felt the same, if she too lay awake at night, haunted by the taste of what might have been. I waited for a sign, a message, a miracle, but none came. Life moved forward, relentless and unfeeling, and I moved with it, changed and unchangeable, marked by love, ruined by hope, stubbornly, quietly alive.